The last lap, a lot of debate on right or wrong, a lot of good hard racing. Mike, me and you were talking earlier. You brought up a great point about Ross Chastain just being able to get the lead and how you appreciated that on one of those final restarts.
I had a tweet crafted. I told Dale this. I said I had a tweet crafted. I was so impressed with the way Ross took the lead. Who on that restart thought Ross was going to be able to pass A.J. Allmendinger, and who was the other car? Was it
Bowman?
Bowman? Well, I think Bowman kind of came in there. Anyways, I don't remember where Chastain started on that last restart, but it was a sick move, and it was crystal clean. Like, nobody, I can't believe it. I thought they for sure were going to put bumpers to each other. I thought they were going to mix it up. Ross took that lead with authority, and I was so impressed that I started writing a tweet for when he took the win. I'm like, totally earned. Good for Ross Chastain. The dude just went out there and he did it clean. And right as I was having that tweet prepared, then all hell broke loose. And that's like, delete. Let's go ahead and watch this thing, because I didn't even think he was going to win at that point. So I was already impressed with the way I thought Ross did what he had to do to get the lead. And that's even before the end of it, right? But we must say that was set up because of A.J. Allmendinger putting the bumper to him first. I didn't think A.J. Allmendinger was wrong for what he did, and I didn't think Ross was wrong in what he did to get the lead back. I have no problems with any of that stuff. Moreover, I would say that if you look at Ross's whole body of work and the context behind his whole career, you're going to tell me after all he's been through, you go back to that D.C. solar fiasco, and you go back to the time at Darlington when Harvick, blistered him after that race and all these things. Ross Chastain, that's a hungry dog out there. You going to deprive a hungry dog a win?
I agree with you.
Absolutely not.
I totally agree with you. Totally agree with you.
I agree with you, Mike. So you got to think about everything that he's been through. And here he is going, Ross is going to drive full-time for Ganassi. The team gets sold. That brought in a level of uncertainty for a guy like him. Are they going to want to keep me? Does this mean I still got a deal? He doesn't know that, even if he's hearing positive things from Trackhouse. He doesn't know for sure, right?
You never do.
You never do. He's seen this. He's seen all this before, and he knows how easily things can just fall apart. I talked to Ross leading into this year, and he's like, "Man, I'm not sure how this is going to go. I'm nervous." He's like, I'm burnt out on sort of rebuilding my hopes and rebuilding my confidence in each season. And I was like, man, this is gonna, I told him something positive that, to stay the course and that he's gonna be fine. But I'm not sure I even knew for sure, what his future held going into this year. No one saw Trackhouse being this competitive. Nobody did. There's people that wanted it to happen, but no one was going to start the year and go, oh, yeah, Trackhouse is going to be up front running for top fives and wins.
Right.
So a couple things that I wrote down, taking some notes to prepare for this conversation. So AJ ends up in the gravel. All right, when you're racing hard at the end of the race and there's beating and banging, AJ got into Ross a little bit in one corner, just moved him up out of the way and takes the spot. The code, unwritten code, is that now Ross has the green light to do exactly the same thing to AJ. But Ross sent AJ into the gravel. All right? And instead of AJ finishing second, third, fifth, AJ ended up in the 30s or 20s, right? He ends up in the gravel and the whole field goes by. So that's no good. All right? Ross absolutely could get aggressive with him and push him out of the way. It would have been completely okay. But the man ended up in the gravel, basically like putting him in the fence. And he ends up losing 24 positions. That is the only part that I was a little disappointed in. But Ross doesn't have any control really over AJ and how AJ's, he shoved him down in the corner wicked hard. He was like, look, you're going into this corner way farther than you want to. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that I'm going to win this race, and I really could care less what happens to you. The other factor, too, that ends up putting AJ in the gravel is Bowman. If Bowman's not there and they don't collide, I think AJ saves the car, makes the corner, and then finishes in the top 5. But Bowman and him collide. Maybe it broke some of the steering linkage or whatever in the car of AJ. They hit pretty hard wheel to wheel.
Yeah.
But the collision also contributed into AJ going into the gravel. So I don't put all of that responsibility for AJ losing 24 positions on the last corner of the race on Ross's lap. Now, Ross absolutely didn't have to send him in there that hard, but he was hell-bent to win that race. And the other thing, too, so Ross, about 4 or 5 years ago, was literally about to go back and work the family business, leave the sport entirely. All right, and I know we've already mentioned about how he's had deals come together and fall apart, and his DC Solar thing looked like a surefire full-time year in the Xfinity Series with Ganassi, and he ends up going to Colleague and creating an opportunity for himself there. But just a couple years ago, he was literally assuming that his career was over. Mm-hmm. All right. The thing about Ross is, we've raced him in the Xfinity Series, and there are races where Ross has been a renter in one of our properties. Me and my sister had this business where we've got about 20 rentals in the area. Ross has over the years rented from us, so I've gotten to know him, and I pull for him. I pull for him to do good. In chatting with him, he's a good guy, mm-hmm. right? And he's a hard worker.
And he pays his money on time.
When we raced against him in the Xfinity Series, he did some things. He did some to our cars that I wasn't happy about.
Really?
Yes. Remember him and Algar beating on each other for a couple weeks and then wrecking each other at Watkins Glen and.
Oh yeah.
So I forgot
about that.
Yeah. So this is another layer to the whole thing: is you got to understand who Ross is, and this is Ross going forward. And I don't think for everybody in the sport it's an introduction. If you've watched him in the Xfinity Series, this is who he is. This is how he races.
He's aggressive.
He's aggressive, overly aggressive. You push him, he's going to push you twice. It's not an eye for an eye. It's 2 eyes. He doesn't apologize for it. He's like, hey, I've worked hard for this opportunity. I've worked hard to be in this position in this corner, and I'm taking it. Mm-hmm. It's mine. And so he said as much after the race. You're not going to teach him a lesson. He's not going to get out of the car after that win, and you're not going to go up to Ross and say, hey man, this is what you should have done. He ain't listening to that.
And saying, he has to look himself in the mirror, that ain't going to work.
Nope.
He's fine with what he sees in the mirror.
That's right.
And he should be.
Yeah. When we see Ross in this position again, we need to know what's coming. Ross is has built a reputation from how he handled all these things throughout his career, whether in the truck or the Xfinity Series. And this is Ross. This isn't a guy trying to find his way. This is him. And so he's going to, if you shove him, he's going to shove you back harder. And he's absolutely going to do whatever it takes to win the race or put himself in victory lane. Every single opportunity he gets, he's going to get out and smash his watermelon and not apologize to anybody. Mm-hmm. And so now I think he can admit his faults. He's not beyond being realistic about a situation if he makes a mistake. And him and AJ, they got a little past.
Yeah.
I don't know that everything at Colleague was so rosy between them two.
What race was it?
Daytona.
Daytona, mm-hmm. where they all took each other out.
Yeah.
Right.
And so
everything you just said about Ross, though, I don't think I have a single problem with it.
I don't either.
I'm not, and I know you're not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying everything you described, I like that in a racer.
I do too, but I didn't love it all the time. Like what I was trying to say is when we raced against him in Xfinity Series, there were weeks at a time where I'm like, damn, punt that damn Ross. Put him in the fence. You know what I mean?
And he probably had it coming, right?
Yeah. Show this boy a lesson. And then he comes back swinging, and then his confrontation with us will go away, and 4 weeks later or sometime later, you're like, go Ross! He's almost going to win this race. That's awesome, So it's hot. It's not hot and cold. Ain't the right word for it, but he's going to rub your guy the wrong way one day.
Yeah.
But if you're a Ross fan, you're going to be entertained. I was reading some comments by Denny Hamlin on social media, and Denny was talking about how what happens on the last lap there. I guess it's really who's involved that determines in the public eye whether it was okay or not okay. And while I think that's a great point by Denny, but I guess I would take that a step further and say, well, why would how does the public determine what guy gets a pass and what guy doesn't? And I would say that it comes down to your reputation. As I was saying with Ross, like he's built this reputation, and you come to expect what we got Sunday when he's put in that position. And when Dale Earnhardt was racing, you knew it was coming.
Right.
He had a reputation. He built that reputation. You knew what to expect. He was called the Intimidator, moved people out of the way, and the world didn't explode. Right? Mm-hmm. Because everybody thought, well, that's how he drives, right? If a guy's got a history of doing asshole things, inside or outside the car, all right, if he's perceived to be a jerk, when he goes out there and runs over somebody or gets involved in some kind of situation like that, he's got to expect a certain reaction from public, right? From the grandstands.
100%.
If a guy's perceived as a nice guy, take Kenseth, for example, pretty good guy, right? Pretty clean record, goes out there and intentionally wrecks the 22 at Martinsville. Massive. I mean, we never see that. Hardly ever see a guy go back out on the track, wrecked, laps down, and without question take out the leader of the race, right? And he got a pass.
I'm going to tell you what I think it is. It's one more. I'd take it a step further. It's if they're hypocrites about it.
Right.
Hypocrisy is what you don't have the stomach
Mike.
for.
My point is that the reaction by the public to what we saw Sunday is based on that person's past history in and out of the car, who they are, like if you're a good guy or a bad guy, or you're perceived as a jerk. Maybe you're not really a jerk, but if people think you are, if you're persona that you've built by what you say in an interview, the comments you make or the reaction to controversy or the reaction to being involved in anything, all this stuff is your body of work, right? Mm-hmm. You build this up over the years. And then, so people are going to, that's what people take into account. And when you're out there on the racetrack and get in a dust up, people react based off of who they assume you are, right?
And their assumptions come off of it. Your dad was never a hypocrite. In other words, your dad could he could race aggressively. This is my perception of it. You know your dad better than I do. I'm saying I would watch him and he would do it. And when he'd do it, he didn't apologize for it. But also when it got done to him, he took it like a man, and you knew he was going to reciprocate it down the road. I mean, like you just knew that he wasn't, but he didn't sit there and whine about it. Whereas, this isn't going to be the best example, but it's the only one in my mind right now. There was a time when Tony Stewart caused a string of accidents, and then when it happened to him, he called them no talent SOBs and this, that, and the other. And I don't want to use the word whine, but he basically was sitting there questioning people's talents. And so when you can dish it out, but then when it happens to you, you sit there and question everybody's talent, that to me is hypocrisy. And the best example, now that I think about it, comes to to this day, you wrecked Brian Vickers at Vegas. And Brian Vickers did this thing where he gets out of the window. There, he's sitting there in the infield, and he starts doing this at you, like something like this. I think it was Vegas, might have been California, something. It was early in the race. You took him out. It's an accident. And he's sitting there doing this. And I'm like, whoa. This SOB cleaned all of you guys out at Talladega. And so sitting there with the hands up as if you've done something that he is above him. It's would never happen to a Brian Vickers or Ricky Stenhouse this year, questioning, hey, there's no talent. They ran out of talent. Well, how many wrecks has Ricky Stenhouse caused? That to me is the hypocrisy, and I think that fans see through that. If Ross Chastain, the next time, he knows AJ's got one for him, right?
Yeah.
Down the road. If he gets cleaned out by AJ at the next road course and AJ wins the race and Ross does his post-race interview and he says, yeah, the dude just ran out of talent. I don't know. He's going to have to look himself in the mirror, man. I wouldn't race like that.
That's
and we're like,
wrong thing to say.
That would be the wrong thing to say. And now
Exactly.
Ross now people are going to respond accordingly to that. But if Ross goes, hey,
I had it coming.
He won I won a race that way. He won a race. Congrats to him. We'll do it again. Something like that. Then I can stomach it, right? I think that the people that have a problem with Kyle Busch, the people that have a problem with some of these guys, Harvick even, they've all had their moments where, after a race, they're still hot and bothered, and they're sitting there and they're calling out, they're questioning talent, they're questioning motives, and they're questioning moves, and I wouldn't have done this, and you've all done it. All of you have done it. Let's just call it. You were the only one that I remember to be like, man, that was fun. Even when you took the bad end of it, you were like, man, we were just out there racing. It was fun. I never remembered you going out there and saying, these no driving SOBs don't know what they're doing out here and all that stuff. No, it's just racing. Why can't we call it that? I thought the end of the Dakota race was racing. And I think that Ross probably has one coming. Mm-hmm. And I think he knows it.
Yeah, I think, if you're doing things over a long period of time that continue to fuel the perception of you as a protagonist or a jerk, you can't be ever expected to be treated like a hero.
Right.
In a situation like that. You're not going to get out and have people applauding.
Right.
They're going to go, there's that asshole.
Right.
Doing asshole things.
Right.
Right.
If you're a heel, be the heel.
Yeah.
Stone Cold Steve Austin can go, he was mean to me today. Look, be who you are.
Yeah. If you like that conversation, you're going to want to listen to the entire podcast, the Dale Jr. Download, available on all major podcast platforms.